The sky was a dull shade of gray when the sound of boots echoed through the camp. Frost clung to the barbed wire fences like silent claws, and the morning air bit into our skin even through the thin, worn uniforms we had been issued weeks ago. I stood in line with the others, Japanese women captured during the last chaotic retreat. The war had torn away our identities, leaving us as nothing more than prisoners. My hands trembled, not just from the cold, but from the uncertainty that came with every sunrise here. "Attention!" a guard barked. We stiffened. The guards, draped in heavy coats and armed with blank, unreadable expressions, marched before us. One of them stopped, surveying us with a slow, unsettling calm. "You!" He pointed randomly, then to the rest of us. "All of you," stepped forward. We exchanged nervous glances. No one dared speak. "You are to remove your coats and outer clothing," the guard said sharply. A silence heavier than the winter air fell over us. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. One of the women beside me, Aya, whispered, "They can't be serious." But the guard's gaze left no room for hesitation. Slowly, reluctantly, we obeyed. One by one, we slipped off our already thin coats. The moment the wind hit my inner clothes, I felt as though ice crawled across my bones. I clenched my jaw, trying not to shiver, but it was useless. The guard stood silently, watching. For a moment, I thought this was just another humiliation routine, just a test of obedience. But then the lead guard stepped forward again, his voice calm, too calm. "That was the first order," he said. "Now, for the second." Aya gripped my arm, her breath sharp with fear. My pulse raced violently. What could possibly come next? Whatever it was, we all felt it. It was going to be worse. Much worse. The wind cut to the thin fabric of our underlayers like invisible knives. Some of the younger prisoners were already shaking uncontrollably. I wrapped my arms around myself, biting down on panic. The lead guard paced slowly in front of US, boots crunching over the icy ground. "You must understand," he said with eerie composure. "Discipline is tested not only through obedience, but through endurance." Endurance. The word lingered like a curse. "You will remain in place," he continued. "No coats, no blankets, not until we say so." A gasp escaped someone at the far end of the line. Another woman whispered, "But it's freezing." The guard's eyes snapped in her direction. "Those who complain," he said, "will lose the privilege of standing. They will kneel." A heavy dread settled over us. Kneeling on frozen ground would be unbearable, maybe even dangerous. Aya swallowed hard beside me. "If we kneel, we might not get back up," she murmured. I nodded, barely breathing. Minutes passed, though they felt like hours. The cold seeped deeper into my skin, creeping into my chest, slowing my heartbeat. My fingertips went numb. Some prisoners clenched their jaws to suppress their chattering teeth. Others silently cried, tears freezing on their cheeks. One guard paced by, inspecting our posture as though examining statues. "Still," he muttered, tapping the ground with his baton. "You must remain still." Every second standing there became a silent battle of willpower. My body screamed for warmth, but the fear of punishment kept me upright. I could feel Io wavering beside me. I pressed my numb fingers into her palm as a silent message. Stay strong. But deep inside, a new terror had already taken root. If this was only the second command, what were they planning for the third? The minutes stretched into what felt like frozen eternity. The guards stood just far enough away to make us feel alone, yet close enough for their presence to smother us like a shadow we couldn't escape. My breathing was shallow. The tips of my fingers felt like they didn't belong to me anymore. Aya's teeth chattered louder now, each tremor betraying the internal battle she was losing. Somewhere in my left, someone whimpered softly. "Stand straight," a guard shouted sharply. The prisoner stiffened again, tears freezing at the corner of her eyes. I didn't know her name. Most of us no longer introduced ourselves. The war had taught us that names could become tombstones too, quickly. Aya swayed slightly. I nudged her gently. "You're okay," I whispered, though I didn't believe it myself. "No, I can't," she murmured, barely forming words. If she collapsed now, they might force her to kneel. If she kneeled, she might not get up again. I could already see frost clinging to the rough ground beneath our feet, as if the earth itself wanted to pull us down into its frozen grip. A guard noticed the wavering in the line. He walked forward slowly, eyes narrowing as he singled out a woman near the front who was visibly shaking. "You," he said calmly. "Step out." The woman hesitated, eyes filled with terror. "Now." She stepped forward. We held our breath. The guard stood inches from her face. "If you cannot endure, you will demonstrate a lesson for the others," he said. My stomach twisted. A lesson? That word never meant anything good here. He pointed to the frozen ground. "Kneel." The woman's lips parted in horror. "No, please." "Kneel," he repeated, his voice as cold as the air around us. She sank to her knees. The moment she touched the frozen soil, her breath left her in a sharp gasp of pain. Her body trembled violently. The rest of us watched, frozen, in more ways than one. The guard stepped back. "Remember," he said to all of us, "weakness is cold's first victory." Aya squeezed her eyes shut, tears she couldn't wipe away welling up. In that moment, I realized something terrifying. We weren't just fighting the guards. We were fighting winter itself. And winter was merciless. The woman who knelt remained still at first, shoulders heaving as the cold seeped through her bones faster than any of us standing. Minutes passed. Her breathing grew weaker, her head dipping forward as though gravity had suddenly tripled. We could see her strength unraveling. One of the guards checked his watch, unbothered by the shivering line before him. For them, this was a routine. For us, it was survival measured in heartbeats. Aya whispered, voice trembling, "If she collapses completely—" "I know," I whispered back. We all knew. Suddenly, her body lurched sideways. Her arm fell limp. Her face pressed into the frost-covered ground. She didn't move again. For a split second, I dared to think they would help her now. But the guards simply noted it with cold indifference. "She has failed the test," one of them said. A murmur of horror rippled through our line, but no one dared speak it aloud. Aya covered her mouth as though trying to hold her breath, as if breathing too loudly might end in punishment. I stared ahead, forcing myself not to look at the unconscious woman still lying in the frost. Every instinct screamed to reach out, to pull her up, to do something. Anything. But fear was a chain as tight as any rope. One of the guards finally stepped toward us again. "Stand ready for the next phase," he announced flatly. My chest tightened. Next phase. The phrase sent a cold deeper than winter through my spine. Aya clenched my sleeve weakly. "What more can they take?" she asked, her voice cracking. I swallowed hard, my breath fog in the air. "They'll push until we break," I said quietly. "That's the point." She looked at me with wide, terrified eyes, and it was then I made a silent decision. I didn't know how long I could endure this, but I knew one thing. If she fell, I wouldn't let her fall alone. The unconscious woman was left where she had fallen, a silent warning etched in frost. None of us dared to move or look too long, though her stillness pulled at our minds like a haunting echo. A new guard stepped forward, taller, broader, his expression unreadable beneath his cap. "You will now move," he ordered. "In formation, slowly. No one is allowed to fall behind." Marching in freezing temperatures without proper clothing wasn't just cruel. It was a calculated trial. Movement meant energy, but it also meant risk. If someone slipped or collapsed, they might never stand again. Aya's knees trembled as we took the first synchronized step. The ground crunched with each movement, brittle and unforgiving. We moved like shadows, silent and shivering. The cold gnawed relentlessly at our exposed skin. My breath became painful, sharp as broken glass with every inhale. Aya stumbled slightly. I steadied her with a subtle elbow support, careful not to draw the guard's attention. Left, right, left, right. Our feet moved to an invisible rhythm of fear. One woman behind us coughed violently, her whole body shaking. A guard's glare silenced her instantly. She forced the cough down, tears slipping from her eyes as she marched. I focused on the horizon ahead, a blur of snow, sky, and barbed wire. Somewhere beyond this, there had to be warmth. Somewhere beyond this, there had to be hope, or at least something less cruel. Aya's voice came as a faint whisper between steps. Why are they doing this? I didn't know the true answer. Maybe it was to test our obedience. Maybe to see who could survive. Or maybe because it reminded us how powerless we had become. To see who breaks, I murmured, and who refuses to. She turned her head slightly toward me. And you, she asked. Which one are you? The wind gusted around us, biting into my neck. I kept marching. I haven't decided yet, I answered. Just then, a woman at the far right slipped on the icy ground. She gasped as she hit her knees hard. A guard immediately approached. We didn't dare look. We could only listen. You will rise, the guard commanded. The woman struggled, legs shaking uncontrollably. If you fail to stand, he added, you will be left here. A chilling silence fell over all of us. The woman tried again and stumbled. Aya's fingers tightened around her fist. I closed my eyes briefly, praying she would get back up. The fallen woman's breathing was heavy and uneven, visible in ragged clouds of white. Every failed attempt to stand felt like watching hope crumble one crack at a time. A guard stepped closer, his boots grinding against the frozen dirt. He watched her struggle without a hint of sympathy. His silence was more terrifying than any shouted threat. Finally, with a strained cry, she pushed herself up, legs shaking violently. But standing. Barely, but standing. A quiet, collective exhale passed through us like a ghost of relief. No one dared to cheer. No one even nodded. But something in the air shifted, just slightly. She wasn't strong because she stood. She was strong because she refused not to. Aya's lips parted as though she wanted to speak to her, to say you did it, but she stayed silent. Instead, she marched on with a little more resolve in her step. The guards resumed walking, motioning for us to keep moving. We followed, the icy ground crunching beneath us like brittle glass about to shatter. Minutes felt like hours. My legs burned from the cold, not with heat, but with a numb ache that warned of something worse. I focused on breathing evenly, on keeping Aya steady beside me, and on not thinking about how easily any of us could collapse next. The camp perimeter loomed ahead, a line of tall wooden posts framing a watchtower. Beyond it, we saw nothing but more snow and silence. Aya leaned slightly toward me, her voice barely there. I thought she was gone. She's not, I said quietly. Not yet. Aya glanced at me. Do you think we'll make it through this day? I didn't answer right away. I didn't know how, but I saw the woman who had fallen still walking, even if unsteadily. So I finally replied, we just have to make it through this hour. A guard suddenly turned, eyes sharp. We straightened instantly. His gaze lingered for a moment, as though testing us one by one. Then he spoke, his tone unusually calm. The next stage begins soon. Aya swallowed hard. I clenched my fists. Another stage, another trial, and winter was still winning as we approached the far side of the compound. Something unexpected came into view. A bonfire. It crackled quietly in a stone-lined pit, flames dancing recklessly against the cold as though mocking us. The heat shimmered in the air, visible, almost touchable. For a moment, it didn't feel real. Aya's breathing hitched. They lit a fire, she whispered, voice filled with something between hope and dread. We all stared. Not a single one of us was invited closer. The guards positioned us in formation, just far enough away that the warmth couldn't reach us, but close enough to see it, smell it, crave it. The fire became torture, without a word spoken. We stood there in silence, watching the one thing our bodies begged for burn just out of reach. When the guard spoke, strength is not wanting warmth. Strength is proving you can exist without it. Aya's eyes glistened, not from tears, but from raw exhaustion. I tightened my jaw. The woman who had fallen earlier barely kept herself upright. Her legs quivered like she was standing on breaking ice. My mind drifted, not to escape, but to memory. I remembered a time before this. A small house near the coast. The soft warmth of morning sunlight through paper screens. A bowl of rice still steaming. My sister laughing when she burned her tongue because she was always too impatient to wait. I blinked hard, dragging myself back to the present. Aya glanced sideways at me. "What did you think of just now?" she whispered. "Heat," I said simply. "I thought of food," she replied with a broken smile. Then her voice sank lower. "I thought of miso soup." We fell silent again as the guards paced like wolves around the fire they refused to share. Minutes passed. Then one guard clapped his hands once, sharply. "The next instruction," he announced. We tensed like strings pulled too tight. "You will remain in place until one among you takes responsibility." A murmur of confusion ran through our ranks. Responsibility for what? Someone dared to ask. The guard smirked. For being the weakest. A chill sharper than the wind ran through me. We were not just fighting the cold anymore. We were being pushed to turn against each other. Aya's voice trembled. "They want someone to step out." I nodded slowly. And for the first time, I feared that the cold outside was not our worst enemy. It was a cold they were trying to plant inside us. The silence that followed the guard's announcement was suffocating. No one dared to move. No one dared to breathe loudly. The fire's crackling now sounded unnervingly loud, almost like it was laughing at us. The guard crossed his arms, eyes scanning our faces. "One of you must step forward," he said calmly. "The weakest always reveals themselves." Aya tensed beside me. I could feel her shaking, not from the cold this time, but from fear of being chosen or choosing herself. A woman near the front clutched her arms tightly, looking downward. Another bit her lip until it bled. No one wanted to be seen as weak. Not here, where weakness could mean punishment, isolation, or worse. The woman who had earlier fallen was now swaying again, her breathing uneven. She was on the edge, but still standing, still fighting. The guard watched her closely. "If you fail to choose," he added, "we will decide for you." A hush of dread fell over us all. Aya whispered shakily, "If someone steps forward, what will they do to her?" I shook my head slightly, afraid that even thinking too loudly might trigger something. "I don't know." One prisoner, trembling, half raised her foot as though debating whether to step forward. Another woman beside her subtly shook her head, silently pleading, "Don't." This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about dignity. The guard frowned, clearly impatient with our hesitation. "So no one will admit they are weak?" His tone was mild, too mild. My chest tightened, because I knew what that meant. He turned and nodded to two other guards. They began walking slowly along the line, stopping in front of each woman, studying her expression, her posture, the quiver of her muscles. When they reached Aya, my breath caught. She tried to stand tall, but her legs were shaking visibly. Her lips were pale, her arms wrapped so tightly around herself that her fingers had gone numb white. One guard paused in front of her. Aya froze. I felt my heartbeat hammering against my ribs like a warning drum. The guard tilted his head slightly. "You," he said quietly. Aya's breath shattered, but before she could respond, I stepped forward. Every instinct screamed at me to step back, but my feet wouldn't move, because I had already decided earlier, if she fell, I wouldn't let her fall alone. The guard raised an eyebrow. "You are admitting weakness?" he asked, studying me. I met his gaze without flinching. "I am stepping forward," I said. He smirked. "That is enough." Aya gasped softly behind me. As the guards turned to escort me away from the line, the fire flickered brighter and warmer than ever before. And for the first time since the freezing trial began, I felt no cold at all. The guard motioned for me to walk forward. The moment I took a step away from the line, I felt dozens of eyes on me. Fearful, stunned, guilty, grateful. I couldn't tell which emotion belonged to whom anymore. Aya's whisper reached me faintly. "Why?" I didn't turn back. If I did, I might lose my resolve. The cold felt sharper now, cutting at my exposed skin as though punishing me for stepping out of line. Each step toward the guards made me feel smaller, more vulnerable, but also strangely lighter. One of the guards stopped me just a few meters from the fire, close enough to feel a soft hint of warmth brushing my face like a memory, but far too distant to bring relief. The lead guard studied me for a moment. "Why did you step forward?" His tone was casual, almost conversational. That unsettled me more than anger would have. I chose to, I replied. That is not an answer, he said, eyes narrowing slightly. Weakness or defiance? I hesitated. There was no safe answer. Finally, I spoke. I stepped forward because someone had to. He studied me in silence, perhaps trying to determine if that was courage or foolishness. You think taking another's place makes you strong? He asked quietly. I didn't respond. He leaned slightly closer. Strength is not sacrifice, he said. It is endurance without needing to sacrifice. I kept my gaze steady. Even as my heartbeat thundered, he stepped back, signaling to another guard. Separate her from the line. He ordered, she will be evaluated. Evaluated. A vague word, dangerous in its uncertainty. As they guided me away, I looked once, only once, back at the line. Aya was staring at me, her lips parted in silent protest. I gave her the slightest nod. Stand. Endure. Don't collapse. Her eyes glistened, but she held her posture. The guards led me toward a smaller, fenced-off area near the rear side of the compound, one I had never been close to before. Behind me, I could still hear the fire crackling, distant now, unreachable. As the heavy gate creaked open, a question echoed through my mind. Was I being led to warmth or somewhere far colder than even the winter outside? They led me through the gate and into a narrow holding area. No shelter, no comfort, just a different kind of cold. A wooden bench sat against the wall, frosted over. I was ordered to sit. I did. The guard stood nearby, watching, not threatening, not cruel, simply waiting. Waiting to see what I would become now that I had stepped out of line. Minutes passed. The cold bit deeper. But something was different now. I was no longer fighting just the wind or the frost. I was fighting the doubt inside me. I closed my eyes, not to escape, but to remember. The warmth of the fire I wasn't allowed to touch. Aya's trembling but determined gaze. The woman who had fallen but forced herself back to her feet. The line of silent prisoners still marching the cold, yet refusing to break each other apart for survival. In that moment, I realized something. They were testing us for weakness, but they had also unintentionally revealed our strength. Not strength of one, but strength of us. The gate opened again. The same lead guard stepped in, arms folded. You have been watched, he said simply. You stepped forward. You endured isolation. You did not beg. You did not collapse. You did not betray anyone. He observed me closely. You may return to the line. My breath caught, not from fear, but from relief so deep it almost hurt. I stood, unsteady but unbroken. As they escorted me back, the fire still burned in the distance, but now it no longer mocked me. It reminded me of something else. We were cold on the outside, but inside, something had stayed burning. When I stepped back into formation, Aya's eyes were red, but determined. The woman who had fallen earlier was still standing, even though she leaned slightly to one side. Others glanced my way, not as toward someone weak, but someone who had helped them avoid turning on each other. A subtle, silent thread connected us now. Not spoken, not aloud, but real. The guard gave one last command. The trial is over. Coats were returned. We took them with shaking hands. As I slipped mine on, it felt almost unbearably warm. But even then I understood what had truly kept us standing through the cold wasn't the coat. It was the fire they tried to keep out of reach. The fire we carried inside.